This episode is brought to you by Paramount Plus. If you don't already subscribe to Paramount Plus, please use our affiliate link by going to talkthroughmedia.com/Paramount Plus. Using our affiliate link gives us a little credit, which helps us to keep bringing you great content. U.S. residents only.
Hello, and welcome to episode 13 of the Star Trek Lower Decks. I did it again. The Star Trek Lower Decks podcast. Who knew that was so difficult for me to say? I'm Brian.
And I'm Kyle.
And this morning, we didn't record Friday night. All my fault, because I went to take a nap. That turned into an all-night thing. Anyway, we will be covering Season 2, Episode 3 of Star Trek Lower Decks, titled, We'll Always Have Tom Paris. But before we get started, we want to mention that this podcast is supported by our Patreon supporters. Your money helps to pay for a portion of monthly hosting fees, software we use to produce the podcast, domains, and other things that it costs to put on the podcast on a monthly basis, whether we are producing episodes that month or not. So we would like to thank a new supporter this week, Trey Whipkey. Yay! So if you want to become a supporter yourself, you can go to patreon.com/Brian Aruthi, and it takes as little as $1 per month. And we wanted to just mention at the beginning of this podcast, we are doing something new this week for Patreon listeners only. So it's always been a struggle for us to get the episodes out in a timely basis. So we're also trying to grow our Patreon presence and to help us get to a point where the network is essentially, covering all of its fees and that. So one of the ways that we think we can do it is by offering in the Patreon feed early access to episodes. So what they are going to be is a much less edited version of the podcast. Maybe they won't quite sound as good because they'll be recorded from the Zoom recording, but they'll be lightly edited, maybe not even edited at all, maybe just spaces taken out, and much more raw. So there's a bit of a trade-off there. You'll get the episodes faster, but they'll have more warts. But we're going to offer those and see if that is a feasible thing we can offer, because we think that if we do that, we'll get more people joining the Patreon. So this is an experiment this week, and we'll see how it goes. Hopefully it goes well, and we'll keep this going for perpetuity. So anything you want to add to that, Kyle?
No, I mean, other than, we're going to do that also for The Walking Dead. And it's just, we both, edit our shows, and it does take a long time. And so it's like being able to get this out, and not have to worry too much about trying to clean it up or whatever, you'll get this so much faster.
Yeah.
So it's definitely, I think it's a good perk, even if I think it'll sound fine. There might be, little things here and there, but
I found that the version that is coming on Zoom is much better than it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
So the audio quality is better. I mean, the only thing that, we won't edit out coughing and, stuff like that, dogs barking, whatever.
Yeah.
There won't be that kind of stuff edited out. There won't be, if a train goes by or something like that, you'll be hearing it. But, or if we drop a bowl of soup in our lap, you'll be hearing that too. But sometimes that's the best stuff. So anyway, that is new to patrons this week, and we'll let you know how that goes. But if you want to subscribe to that, go to patreon.com/Brian Aruthi and sign up. But we're going to be producing some new shows for Patreon subscribers only. And if you are a Patreon subscriber, maybe you'll hear some of that very soon. All right. So anyway, you can also help us by simply, if you're listening to us via Apple Podcasts, give us a 5-star rating, and even more helpful, a review. So it's been a while actually since we've gotten any reviews. So would really be helpful if you could help us along and give us that.
Pretty please.
Yes, pretty please. Well, we don't really have any additional feedback for last week's episode, but I will say that after watching the episode a couple more times, that I am going to bring that rating up to a 9 from an 8.7. I enjoyed it more upon multiple watchings. So other than that, we don't really have anything additional to add. Didn't get any after the recording feedback. So anyway, so let's move on to this week. So it's season 2, episode 3. We'll always have Tom Paris. And of course, you may remember there was a TNG episode from season 1 called We'll Always Have Paris. I was thinking we were going to see a similar scene in this, but we didn't. Written by executive story editor M. Willis, who also wrote season 1, episode 7, Much Ado About Boimler last season. That's the one where he ends up going to the resort planet to, get. Yeah. And Tendi is also along with her freakish dog. So that one. Anyway, and it's directed by Bob Suarez. The description from ParamountPlus.com is assigned a special task from Dr. Tana. Tendi enlists Mariner for help. On the USS Cerritos, Rutherford is consumed by a bridge crew mystery. Very appropriate there.
Yep.
Don't have a star date. The air date in Pacific time was August 25th. I'm not sure what time the actual episode is released. The third episode in a row that I didn't hit refresh until it showed up. The runtime on this one was 25 minutes, 14 seconds. So Kyle, what did you think of this episode?
I really liked it. There were some issues, but I gave it an 8. In the Nexus, it's always Christmas.
Well, I am going to give it, I don't know, I kind of waffled back and forth. I'm going to give it an 8.5. And there's 3 different things I could call it. It's 8.5. What was the deal with T'Pol's hair that one year? Also 8.5 Mistresses of the Winter Constellations, or 8.5 Klingon acid punks. All right. So we don't have much as far as listener ratings, but go ahead and start with those.
Yep. And we got one from Brian from Colorado, and he said, this episode was a bit of a letdown for me, so I'll give it 7.5 Paris plates.
And it doesn't seem like it was a letdown for Wes from Minnesota. He says 9.5 collector plates out of 10. All right. So let's move on to our yeses.
Yes!
All right. Well, our first yes comes from Brian from Colorado, and he goes and says, Orion pheromones finally becoming a plot point for Tendi. Agreed.
Yeah.
We get to learn a little more about her and the Orions. I thought it was fun that she and Mariner went to a planet that looked a lot like Free Cloud from Picard, and it even had a quark bar in it.
Yeah, I had this in my yeses as well. So I'm wondering if in the 18 or so years between, this is supposed to be, I believe, 2381 at this point, the show started in 2380, but I believe it's now supposed to be 2381. Anyway, between 2381 and Picard's 2399, I'm wondering if Quailor 2 changes its name to Stardust City, or maybe Stardust City is a city on Quailor 2. I don't know. But it definitely looked very similar right down to the quarks, but not just quarks. It looked very, very, very similar.
Yeah, it did. And I kind of, after that comment, I was kind of like, oh yeah, I forgot about that, free cloud. But, it was also like, I was looking around at that scene and it was kind of fun to see. It's like, there was a Vic Fontaine's bar.
Oh yeah.
And then there was like the sign that said Zebulon Sisters, which are, of course, case from season 1, for the choo choo dance. And there was something else, and I forgot to put it in there, but there was like another reference to another person. And I think it was, I don't want to say it's DS9, but anyways, but seeing that, I don't know. I feel like, when we see these kind of scenes or whatever, there's always going to be a Quark's bar.
Right.
So that must be Quark's doing very well, having his little franchises go out.
Well, let's see. You've got a picture from that in your background right now. So let's see if.
Oh, yeah, there was, I don't know what that was, because when the camera moved, it was like, it's just, I can't really read it. So I couldn't have anything. And online, I looked for stuff online about like, oh, what was possibly there, but there was nothing about it. But of course, there's always a Quarks.
Yeah.
And then whatever that is.
Yeah.
All right. He continues on and he says, also, we learned that Mariner served on DS9. Timba, his arms wide. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I was surprised to hear that, actually.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Got a lot of information, actually, from that whole scene.
And the last one we've got is from Wes from Minnesota. He says, Tom Paris kicking Boimler's butt, thinking he's a Kazon. Yeah, that was kind of funny. And I wonder if Tom Paris has any like PTSD there.
It seems like it.
That's what I was immediately thinking of. Anyway, all right, Kyle, what do you have for yeses?
Yeah, I kind of did put a lot, because there was just so much fun in this episode, just like with all the like callbacks and just like references. But I mean, I loved it. It's like Boimler when he was telling everybody that he was going to meet Tom Paris. And then Mariner asked him, is he still a salamander? I mean, that's like, it's so funny, because anyone who's a fan of Voy, and yes, it does save time, knows that Threshold is like the worst episode of Voyager ever, if not even Star Trek. And it's just that, that is just so known. Anything salamander, whatever. It was like, as soon as she said that, I laughed out loud. It was just so funny.
Yeah. And for me, that episode is one that started so fantastically and ended so poorly.
Mm-hmm.
It was a great idea that just really just imploded.
God, it was so horrible. But anyways, though, but it's also then the other part was like Boimler calling Voyager Voy, and like when he said that, I was like, what? Like I've never heard it called that ever in my life. And then sure enough, it's like, okay, no, this is apparently this is new. They wrote this in, and it was like after that. Now it's like Voy is like, I'm just gonna start calling it Voy. Like it totally hooked.
Well, the funny thing is, I've heard it called Voy, and I have called it Voy written for years, right? Since before it came out, actually. And so I got that joke right away. But the funny thing I'm gonna mention, and he has been on not this podcast per se, but the Picard cast, Larry Nemechek. Don't get him started on the whole Voy versus V'ger thing, because he had a whole one of his Trek Tuesdays Live about how he can't stand that people call Voyager Voy, and that it should have been called VGR. And it's like, no way, man.
Yeah, no, boy, it's like, see, and that's like kind of like as a huge fan of Voyager, it's like one of my favorites. I rewatch it all the time, and listen to a few podcasts, here and there. But it's like, but it's just funny because I'm like, I've never heard that, and so I'm sure if it's been used before, okay, you're obviously saying, yeah, I've called it that before, but it's like as someone, maybe I'm just a little less active in those kind of communities,
Right.
like I'm fan stuff. Then it's like, oh, I've never heard of it, and I've never seen it online or like reading a blog. So it's kind of like one of those things where I was like, okay, well, if it's a thing, I'm totally on board. It does save some time.
See, I was involved in the online communities before they were real online communities. Like I was in school at the time, at least some of the time that Voyager was on, going back for computer graphics and web design and all that stuff. And I also was big on CompuServe at the time, right at the beginning of it. So I saw Voy mentioned all the time. So it's always kind of stuck with me. But it's kind of funny because this came up recently. Larry Nemechek brought it on. It's so funny. He can't stand it. So
it's funny. Well, see, that's like the main podcast I list for Voyager was the one on Trek FM, To the Journey.
Oh yeah,
and I've listened to that forever, but I've never heard them ever saying that. So, or if they did, it was like maybe an episode I missed or whatever. But that's kind of where I was like, I've never heard of this before, and it was funny. But so at least I enjoyed it, especially because America's like, oh wow, yeah, it really does save time.
Like I say, I've never verbally said Voy, but I have written it out to say Voy.
Written it,
yeah. So.
Well, then next was, although I kind of would agree with some of the feedback we're going to get, but the Shaxs part, it was fun to see him back, but anyways, just that whole thing. But it was just like when Rutherford was talking to Boimler and Mariner about it, it's like, I have to find out, blah, blah, blah. And so they just list all the things like, oh, no, that happens. It's like, that happens all the time. It's like, oh, and the list that was like transporter buffer or pattern buffer thing, or maybe it was restore Katra, it's like a mirror universe switcheroo.
Yeah.
Like a Borg rebuilt him. Father, our future son from an alternate timeline. He got Genesis device, or time ribboned, and the Mariners are like trapped in the Nexus. Like that's the same thing.
Yeah.
But it was fun because this is like that whole list right there is just like, that's so Trek. Like that we've seen all episodes across all of Trek, of like these things happening to, the bridge crew or, something happening. And it was just so funny, just the way they were like, oh yeah, no, it's like happens all the time.
Yeah. I was trying to remember a Borg rebuilt him kind of thing. I couldn't recall, but
I looked up some of these and actually I think it was like in Dinner Geek, Borg rebuilt him was Neelix when 7 and 9 gave him nanoprobes and like it, fixed him up or whatever. Yeah, because that one I kind of was like, well, there's a lot of Borg things, but yeah, it was about Neelix
and future son from an alternate timeline.
yeah. That was a Picard one.
Oh, okay.
Well, and then also I agree with Brian from Colorado because learning about Tendi, being an Orion, being an Orion, and like just more about her and Mariner serving on DS9, and which there was a lot there.
Yeah,
that was like a lot of filling in the blanks that like it might have been kind of somewhat said but not really explained. So that was kind of really nice to hear because it's just like the fun backstory between these two characters. And then, becoming better friends. Like to me, it was like, that was the best part of the whole episode was just them. I wanted just more of them. So that was cool. Plus, gosh, Mariner, DS9, like I would have loved to see that on the real show, not the cartoon. So I wonder if maybe we'll get some little flashbacks, or I don't know. They did that one, but I'm like, it'd be fun to see.
Yeah.
And I like, again, these are all just like the fun, like little things, because this episode definitely just had so many just like little references or sayings or whatever that just I was like laughing through the whole entire episode. But I loved it when like Tendi was telling Mariner like how hard it was of her getting into the academy because of the stigma around Orions, and she's all like, because they think they're all thieves and pirates. But then right after that, she's like, "Oh, I have a cousin who works in a thieves' den on a pirate outpost."
Yeah.
And like Mariner then says like, "Well, as long as you're not bothered by the optics, it works for me." Like, I don't know, that whole little thing was hilarious. She's like, "No, like I'm not like like those Orions." And then she turns around and is like, "Oh, my cousin, he works."
Yeah.
Like works as one of those. Let's go help, find him to help us. I don't know. It's just great dialogue, great, totally lots of fun. And then the last thing, because it's just another little visual funny joke, was like Mariner ramming into the Cerritos at the end, only to bounce off the shields. And then like Captain Freeman was all like, "Well, that's weird." I don't know. It was just, it was stupid as funny. Like, I don't even remember what like the sound effect that it made. It was like dink, like it just like a like a little thing, bouncing off of like a mirror or something. I don't know. It was I don't know. It was just hilarious, just right at the end. Yeah, that was all I had. So
Okay. Well, it was already mentioned about Quailer 2, so I don't have that anymore. The Tom Paris punching out Boimler because he looked like a Kazon, I thought that was funny. We already kind of talked about that. I did like how they brought back Shax, but they didn't explain how or why. I mean, it does explain why he wasn't removed from the credits, which I know the first 2 episodes were like, well, how come they haven't removed him from the credits? Well, now we know why, because he's still Shax.
Still alive.
We don't know if he's the security chief again, but we do know that he's back. So I guess we'll find out. And of course, I got a kick out of the fact that it wasn't what Dr. Tana didn't need, whatever that, that sex, scratching post. It was the box, because that's what cats want all the time. They want to be in boxes. They want to be in boxes. They want to play in a box. They want, I always tell a story about the first cat that I had. I was spending, hundreds of dollars that I didn't have on toys. And what did he want to play with? A bottle cap. So anyway, that's it for our yeses. So let's move on to our no's.
No!
All right. This comes from Brian from Colorado. And he says his no was the subplots on the Cerritos were very weak in this episode. He also says, I didn't really enjoy how they dragged out Boimler's lack of computer recognition. And the plot lines about Shax coming back to life was just bizarre and not funny.
Yeah, I mean, I would have to agree on the first 2, that they were rather weak. And I just
it's like they because I agree too, because it was kind of like I almost could just like not had needed it.
Yeah.
But I guess since the show is 24 minutes or whatever, and I'm wondering if they're just trying to fit in more because of just like whatever they're going towards to the end of this, through the rest of the season, maybe. And so they're trying to like get all these like storylines going or something, or showing as much as they can. But it does like make some of it just kind of like, okay, it happened, but I'm not even going to really like remember it or want to like rewatch that, or care about it.
Right. Yeah. Well, anyway, the third one we kind of talked a little bit about that. I guess I agree with you that it was bizarre, but I thought it was really funny. So, that's where I kind of diverged there a little bit. He had one more. He says the Doctor's pun far problem wasn't explained. It didn't make sense given the ending. Well, I don't know. Like, if you think about it, the Vulcans have to they go into heat, so to speak, every 7 years. And cats, if you look it up, they go into heat, a lot. So it's not every 7, it's not every, like, it's a lot quicker than, say, humans do. So making it once a year to me makes sense, and it's just that they behave strangely in that period. It's so it's there's not like a direct correlation between, I don't know, putting out the scent or whatever versus being in heat, but they do act odd in that time, from what I understand. So I don't know. That's my take on it.
Yeah, I didn't really like. To me, it was just like when it was mentioned, or when they even just said something about Ponfar, and then that kind of explained it for me. I was like, oh, okay, so she's having something, and then of course the whole mission and blah blah blah. So I didn't really think it was like, I didn't need any more after explanation. It was just like, oh, okay, I know she's going through something, and then they had to go get her toy, which all she really wanted was a box, which I thought was actually kind of funny because it's a cat.
Yep. Yeah. And I have so much experience with that very thing.
Yeah. Yeah. If it's a dog, I have dogs.
Yeah.
And I'll just say the last one that was from Wes from Minnesota, and he was just saying his no was Shaxx being back from the dead, and we need an explanation, darn it.
I like that we didn't get one, but at the same time, I thought it was kind of like they could never pull something like this in a regular show. Like they would have to explain it, but they could pull it in a show like this because it's supposed to be a comedy and supposed to be the Lower Deckers. So,
Yeah, I thought it was kind of weird because then when he does explain it to Rutherford, it's like the things that he was saying was like, oh, like the Black Mountain.
Yeah.
And like a spiritual battleground where you face like 3 faceless of your father or something.
Yeah.
And then you have to eat your heart. And then it like cuts at that. And it was like, okay, well, it's kind of like, that's all I needed to know. Like I don't know. It just seemed, we know that he's back. I guess that was the whole point, but it was just weird.
And I guess that is another way versus, time ribbon and alternate self. Anyway. Yeah. All right. What about you? What do you have for your nose?
Yeah, I thought it was like, because I mean, obviously, I agree with what our listeners had said. So it's kind of like, okay, well, was there anything else? But I thought it was weird that was like Tendi, like whenever the whole thing broke or the doctor's toy broke, like she was afraid of getting fired.
Right.
And I was like, you don't get fired from Starfleet. Like you get a reassigned. And then in that, scene with the Lieutenant Junior Grade Cody asking Shaxx about his return, and then immediately Billis is all like, stop, you're out of line. You're reassigned immediately. And it was kind of like, huh? Like,
yeah.
And so I was like, is that like an ensign thing because she's so low that you can get fired? It just didn't make sense. I didn't get it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that other officer, wasn't he like a lieutenant junior grade? I think so, right?
That's what they said.
Yeah.
Bill said Lieutenant Junior Grade Cody.
Yeah.
And then he got reassigned.
Yeah.
Anyways, that was pretty much all I had.
All right. I just had the Boimler arc. It made no sense to me that he'd be crawling around. If he had any sense at all in his head, he would be on the comms to Billups, getting all those things fixed and not doing something stupid like, going on in
crawling into Jeffrey's tube.
Yeah, it made no sense at all. Like it's and the longer it went on like that, the more it made no sense. So I just had major issue with it as it kept going on and on and on. Just like, no, sorry, but no, that's not, that wouldn't happen like that. So that's all that's my take on it. So let's move on to our not good enough section.
Not good enough, damn it! Not good enough!
We got one small one and one bigger one. Wes from Minnesota says more Tom Paris. I have to agree with that. I didn't think that we got enough of Tom Paris in this episode. I was expecting a lot more. Brian from Colorado says, despite the excellent title of this episode, which had me really looking forward to it, and the fact that Tom Paris did indeed have a cameo, I felt very disappointed by how minor his role was in the story. And his fighting Boimler, because he looked like a Kazon, was just lame. Also, once again, this show referenced a sex object despite the rating at the beginning only flagging violence. I know I sound like a prude, but Star Trek really should keep it more PG. Kids are watching here. I can't dispute that too much. It is what it is. So, I will agree with you to a certain extent on that. And I'll just leave it at that. All right, Kyle, what do you have?
Well, I'm agreeing with, I kind of get what Brian was saying too, because just the fact that like when I did my rewatch, it stuck out more because I had already saw his comments. I don't know. It's a Paramount thing probably. And because it's streaming only, maybe they just don't have to do much or don't think about that. I don't know. So it's like, they did say it a lot during that scene. So I could kind of get like, okay, well, but I have to agree on the whole Tom Paris like more because the whole, like, even when we saw the trailer for the coming season, when we saw that plate with Tom Paris talking, it was like, oh my gosh, like what's, this is awesome. And then we get this episode where it says, we'll always have Tom Paris. And it really just kind of like, we got very little of him. And it was kind of a surprise. It was kind of a surprise. Like the whole episode's named after Tom Paris. So like, why was it just kind of almost like a blip and it was all about Mariner and Tendi? So, it's like, they could have done just a whole show with Boimler and Tom Paris. And there could have been so many references, more, even more to Voyager or Voy. Like Tom Paris could have had all these different interactions with the rest of the crew. There could be like, who knows? It could have been like this whole thing, and it all, I probably, would have been not. I'm trying to say better or whatever. That's what I was expecting, and I didn't get it. So that's kind of it was not good enough, and I agree with you guys. The other part, it was just kind of a thought because it was like, I noticed in the mess hall at the very beginning, like Tendi and Rutherford are eating some like this brown stuff, like in this bowl. But then Mariner had a burrito and Boimler was trying to order a pupusa, which is like, I guess, another Latin food or whatever. So I don't know. I was kind of like, ooh, what's this connection? Like, did I miss something? I guess it's one of those things. Maybe it's like, in season 1, there might have been some play on like what they were eating because we always have these scenes of them in the mess hall, and the only thing I could think of is like, was it something to just kind of a reference to how close of friends they are to each other? So it's always Rutherford and Tendi are the pair, and then Mariner and Boimler are the pair. So it was like something like that. So I don't know. It's just this is more just an observation. Not good enough other than the fact that I'm like, I want to know more. What's going on? Like, is it have anything other than that's what it is, just kind of their relationship to each other. So they're eating similar food. And that was all I had.
Well, who knew that Mariner served on DS9? That's already been mentioned a couple of times, but I was surprised at that. I want to hear more. Maybe we will. They somewhat address Tendi's pheromones, but it's not explained how they seem to be in check on the Cerritos. So, like, does she have to take some kind of like, injection to suppress them? Or, is there more about her not being that type or something? It seems like Mariner herself seems to be susceptible to them, which I guess, I meant to write this down and I didn't, but I guess this terms like Mariner to be pansexual or queer or whatever, which I know had been speculated. I guess or this episode kind of confirms it. It's like all the things that she mentions, like bad boys, bad girls, bad binars. I know she said other things too. Bad, was it non-binary, whatever. So just bad. So we have that. So I'd like that explored a little more. Also, how do you think Shax actually returned? Like, what do you think actually happened there?
I mean, that's, we saw the ship blow up. It's like, I don't know if he, if somehow, what was the little starfish or whatever, or what was the badge or badgie? Badgie was there. So maybe Badgie somehow got he was put in some alternate universe, or something was in stasis, and then maybe he had some kind of similar experience to what B'Elanna had when she was meeting her mom on that voyage to the Klingon dead or whatever. I don't know. It just, something always happens to the big crew, and then something can always bring them back. So since they're not showing us and they're leaving it to our own imaginations, and since this was kind of somewhat of a Voyager episode, maybe he's like Harry Kim, and that's the alternate, that actually came over from the other side.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think that somehow maybe, I don't know, the explosion knocked him out of time or something, and something like that. Like maybe it was something like what happened with LaForge and Ensign Rowe on that one episode where they weren't actually dead. They were just phased or something. Maybe something like that. I don't know.
Do you think they'll ever explain it more?
No.
You think we'll ever hear about this again?
I think that was the joke. Yeah. I think that was the joke, that they won't. I wish they would, but
yeah, I think it does seem where it's just like, okay, the joke was like, oh yeah, this always happens to the bridge crew. So it's like, okay, so he's back. Something happened. We'll never find out because we're lower decks.
Right. Yeah. All right. The other thing I was going to say, when Tendi and Mariner were handing over the head, like trying to get the head over to over onto the elevator, am I not wrong? Was that a Star Trek Generations reference? Like where I don't know, Picard was trying to pull Kirk up. That's what it reminded me of. And I'm not 100% sure that was correct, but that's what it reminded me of. Something that happened between those two.
Yeah.
Okay. I guess that's it for our not good enough section. So let's move on to our feedback section and open hailing frequencies. So our first bit of feedback, we have 3 voicemails this week. First is Jeff, X-Force 11.
Hello, Star Trek fans. It's Jeff, X-Force 11, leaving my feedback about We'll Always Have Tom Paris. So, Voyager is one of my favorite Star Trek series, so to get Robbie in an episode is so cool. I just really wish we could get more of him in Picard or even more in Lower Decks. I know he is so busy directing 2 series that it's kind of hard to fit it in his schedule, but this was a lot of fun. I did enjoy the heist between Tendi and Mariner trying to get the scratching post back to the ship, and just kind of breaking some of the misconceptions about Orions. And so it was just a fun episode, and we got Shax back. Just so much fun. I'm really digging this series, and I'm appreciating what they're doing. All right, those are my thoughts. X-Force 11 is out.
Well, thank you so much, Jeff, X-Force 11, for your voicemail. Good to hear from you again, and the streak is alive.
And I agree. More Tom Paris.
Yeah. I think that's pretty much a given. I think that, I know that he's a busy guy. I know he's doing a lot of directing these days. So even during the COVID-19 times, I'm sure he was busy. So I don't think he lives in Hollywood.
California.
I think he is based out of Atlanta, which is, if that is the case, I'm surprised we haven't seen him direct an episode of The Walking Dead yet. Because you would think if he's out of Atlanta, he would. So maybe he will be this season. Who knows?
Yeah.
But as of this point, he has not. Yeah. So we both agree with you. I think that it would have been nice to have more Tom Paris. So what else can you say? All right. So thank you, Jeff, X-Force 11, and looking forward to hearing from you again. All right. Our next bit of feedback. Well, you know how we thought that Mary Lou was Trey? Well, apparently, at least according to this voicemail and the next one, it wasn't Trey. So we still have a mystery here. So let's move on to our next bit of feedback. This is actually Trey, and this is his voicemail.
This is Trey from Pittsburgh. I listened to your podcast last week, and you kept mentioning me for some reason. So I figured y'all just missed me and wanted to hear my voice. I do enjoy the Lower Decks. I'm a fan, big fan. I like how there's inside jokes, specifically ones that are just mentioned in passing. One thing I didn't like about this week was the Shaq storyline when he got specific in the turbo lift. After death, you battle blah, 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 blah. I didn't really care for that. And also in Star Trek Voy, I didn't care for episodes that dealt with the afterlife. Specifically in Voyager, I can say Barge of the Dead, about B'Elanna's afterlife experience. I did like the Janeway afterlife experience. I don't remember what the episode was called, but that ended up just being an alien intruder in her brain. I think it's awesome that Robert Duncan McNeil was able to come on the Lower Decks. I think it's a great opportunity to have other Star Trek faves on, especially the ones that are still touring the circuit of conventions. I know I have tons of autographs. I actually just need one more from Voyager. So Roxanne Dawson, if you're around listening to this, I need yours. But anyway, I digress. Back to the Lower Decks. I thought the Orion storyline was funny. I thought that the Cat Scratch Post storyline was funny. It's a really lighthearted show, and I really like that you don't have to take it seriously. Like when I watch Discovery or Picard or Voyager, Next Generation, I kind of I look at it and I'm like, yeah, this is great. This is happening. This is part of my canon. And then you look at Lower Decks, and while it still is Star Trek canon, it's more lighthearted, kind of less serious, I suppose, where all the storylines, they're not going to teach me a long life lesson or, make me question my reality or whatever Boimler said last week. But what they are going to do is make me laugh. I watch it with my friends and we all laugh at the inside jokes. So I'm going to kind of just keep listening to the podcast, keep watching Lower Decks, and I enjoy everything you guys are doing, and have a good one.
Well, thank you so much, Trey, for your voicemail, and sorry if you aren't Mary Lou. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I have to kind of agree with him because I know how I felt when I first went into this, when we first started, season 1, where I was kind of like thinking,
you were skeptical.
Yeah, I was very skeptical, but I was also kind of coming off the, it's like, no, the Trek that I know, it's like it is a little bit more serious. There's funny parts, but it's a little more serious. There's certain things that you're supposed to do, or the moral of the story. I think I said this last week, where it's like, there was always some teaching element to it, and then all the fun that would come, with that episode. But like with Lower Decks, it's just like, if I just was like, I just have to just let myself just enjoy it and not, for what it is. And then, with all the, references and all that stuff, it's like, it's like hitting all those points, but I'm not trying to take this as like serious, it was just like, it's just enjoy it. And ever since then, I'm like, I'm loving it. It's like each week I'm like, I can't wait to see it. And I don't know, it's just fun. It's just like, they're definitely, giving us fans, a lot of like, fun watching this show that is still Trek, but then, giving us the fan service with all the references and like, the guest stars and, all that other stuff, and still having fun stories. So definitely am loving it.
Yeah. It's been a bit of an acquired taste, I guess you could say. For me, like I was hopeful, that I would like this. I mean, I've liked the Orville, but it exceeded my expectations pretty much from the get-go. And the only thing, sometimes I think they could let up just a little tiny bit with all the references. Like, it doesn't have to be like every joke is a reference and every reference is a joke. Like doesn't need to be quite that much, but I still do appreciate them when I get them, because it's kind of like you look for them, and when you get them, kind of like, oh, I recognize that. But it doesn't have to be that all the way through, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we had thought last week that Trey was Mary Lou. Well, although we don't have absolute confirmation of this, we have a separate voicemail from Mary Lou. So here it is.
Hello, Brian and Kyle and LT from NC. This is Mary Lou, and I enjoyed your podcast last week. Thank you for letting me entertain you. But my name's Mary Lou. I'm not anybody else. It's just a little old me in my bosoms. That's what I call my cats, my bosoms. But anyways, I'm calling about the Star Trek Lower Decks episode that had to do with Tom Paris. And, it was good to see him again. He was one of my favorites. He was an ensign, then he was a lieutenant, then he was demoted to an ensign, and then he was promoted again. And now he's a commander, and he's kicking K's ass. But it was really Boimler. Poor Boimler, getting into it again with his purple hair. Kind of like my grandson's girlfriend. She has purple hair, and her earrings are the size of my toe. And, not her earrings, but the holes. I could put my whole foot in her ears at one point. And, the nose rings, and the eyebrow rings, and God knows what other rings she has. But anyways, I digress. We was talking about the Lower Decks, and I also liked the Green Orion storyline. That was funny. He was very funny, because reminds me of my husband, Larry. He had pheromones, too. It was called Chanel No. 5. He'd give it to me every birthday that I had. And then he died. It was sad.
Aw.
That was back in the day when I was a young lass. And, that was before Captain Kirk even existed. We was just watching silly shows like Zsa Zsa Gabor on the Queen from Outer Space with the half face and the mask. There was no men. It was just women. It would be so awful with no man. There was a reason I married 4 times, and it wasn't just my bank account getting bigger. I have urges too, kind of like that cat on the Lower Decks, and Tuvok, and Spock, all of the Vulcans during the Pond War, so I know how that cat feels. But anyway, now that we've come full circle back to the Lower Decks, I'd love to join you as a guest host on the podcast. If the schedule's permitting. I'm a busy woman in my retirement. Gotta do things around the house. Take care of my bosoms. Anyway, I'll talk to you next week. You'll hear from me next week, I'm sure.
Yes.
That's good. We want to.
Oh, Mary Lou. We'd love to have you on.
Yes, I want to hear more about these bosoms.
Your cats, that is.
Yes, your cats. Yeah. I'm sorry to hear about your husband, your 4 husbands, I think. So, anyway, yeah, we intentionally didn't listen to all of that one. We wanted to hit that one fresh. I think we listened to the beginning of it and stopped at bosoms. So it's like, okay, that's it. We'll stop there. Yeah. But
but yeah, I digress.
Yes, you digress. So do I. Yeah. So, what can you say?
Just that, Mary Lou is liking the show as much as we are.
She is a new star of our podcast. I must say. All right. That goes to our next bit of feedback, which is we don't have any more feedback. So I had already mentioned the feedback, the additional show notes that I was going to mention. So let's instead go to any notes that you had.
Yeah, and because I remember, I can't remember which episode it was, but you had mentioned like what they were in the hangar, our team, and you were like, "What's going?" There's that runabout that's got like the graffiti. It's like, why would that just be there? And this and that. But then in this episode, we get this like clear view of the side of it. But you can see, we saw the Sequoia, which I don't know if that means anything or if there's, something else in Trek that's Sequoia. But then you see, because Mariner and Tendi are like talking to each other about, when they're getting ready to go on the girls' trip. But you see the side view of that shuttlecraft and Sequoia scribbled on it. But then there's 4 like little figures, and it's 2 red shirts, a blue and a yellow. And like you can even like their hair is kind of like, it has to be them. And so it's just kind of like, is this just their hangout spot, and it's like in the lowest part of, the Cerritos. And so this is just some like runabout that's just been used for like spare parts or something. And then they just made it into like their clubhouse. So, I mean, that's all I got from it. And I took a screenshot, and it just like, this is just their little hangout spot, because they always seem to meet here to like talk about things or, working on something or whatever. So I don't know. It was just fun to see like a better view of it. And that's really all I had to say, was just to bring that up.
So spot the references section from the help of the article that will be in the blog post from denofgeek.com. Boimler can't use the replicator. Mentions that the upgraded security on the Cerritos is responsible for Boimler being locked out of the replicator, which makes me think, it's kind of funny, the Pac-Leds, because of
Pause
the Pac-Leds.
Yeah.
This is vaguely referenced in the DS9 episode Inquisition and Voyager episode Counterpoint, when it's clear people who are confined to quarters, in other words, security risks, can't use the replicators. So Mariner says something like, "We doing sci-fi stuff today," is the second time she has said this season on Lower Decks. The terms science fiction and sci-fi have been used sparingly in the Trek franchise. I remember Picard season 1, Jean-Luc admittedly says that he didn't get science fiction, which I thought was hysterical. It was after, Girardi had been looking at his copy of Isaac Asimov's The Complete Robot. And Interestingly enough, the term sci-fi was still in its infancy in the 1960s and was often thought of as a pejorative term by more serious science fiction enthusiasts who preferred the term SF. To this day, SF tends to denote print science fiction or speculative fiction, while sci-fi usually refers to filmed science fiction. Sci-fi itself is almost a double portmanteau insofar as it's both abbreviation of science fiction and a reference to hi-fi, meaning high fidelity. Mariner's use of sci-fi in Lower Decks could suggest the word has a slightly different implied meaning in the 24th century than it does in the 20th or 21st. Well, that was a lot of speculation by then.
Yeah.
Anyway, of course, the return of Shax and all the ways you can come back to life in Star Trek, that's a bit of a running joke. We've talked about it. The creator of Fairhaven and Captain Proton himself, and that is referring to two holo deck, programs, holo novels that Tom Paris did. One, of course, is the Captain Proton, which I definitely remember, and the other is Fairhaven, which I don't remember much of for some reason, but I guess it was referred to as holoprogram Paris 042, and it appeared in the episodes of Fairhaven and Spirit Folk. This pulpy black and white holoprogram appears in 10 episodes of Voyager and is essentially a blend of Flash Gordon and Buck Rogers. I think that's Captain Proton talking about.
Yeah. Not Fairhaven.
Of course, Mariner says, "Is he still a salamander?" Which we talked about already. Quailor 2, apparently that references the exact same location as was mentioned in the TNG episodes Unification 1 and Unification 2. It's basically a big junkyard. So that's why I wonder if it's going to get renamed, Stardust City. This stuff always happens even on Voy. So anyway, what else? Boimler sings the Voyager theme song. While walking down the corridor, Boimler is humming the Jerry Goldsmith composed theme to Star Trek Voyager. Previously in season 1, he was humming the TNG theme in the episode Temporal Edict, which is also Jerry Goldsmith. Quark's Bar, we've seen mentioned multiple times, and of course it was in Stardust City Rag, and it was called Free Cloud there. That's why I'm still thinking it was, that's right, it was called Free Cloud, not Stardust City. So it was, the planet is Free Cloud, and I'm still thinking maybe it's Quailor 2 in this time frame, but we'll see. The Zebulon sisters, we heard them mentioned already, the extra chew, so it becomes choo 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 dance. Anyway, like a Vulcan on Ponfar, that's the Caitians need to be intimate once a year, like a Vulcan on Ponfar, which is every 7 years. That's, of course, mentioned in the TOS episode Amok Time. Mariner mentions Worf's Mek'leth, which she says she ran over Worf's Mek'leth on Deep Space Nine. That's like the kind of like half a Batleth that we see him have sometimes. Then we hear Mariner say that, this is her 5th posting on the Cerritos, and we know that she's now been on Deep Space Nine and on the Quito, but we don't know where else she's been. So there's been 2 other places besides these 2. Bonstel and Starbase Earhart. I know that Bonistel was, I think that's where is mentioned in the TNG episode Tapestry. That's where Picard loses a heart. That's where he gets the artificial heart originally, and he gets stabbed by a Nausicaan, playing that Domjot game, similar kind of thing. And Starbase Earhart was mentioned also in that same episode, but I believe there's another reference where Picard mentions it in a TNG episode.
Mm-hmm.
He says Far-Base, Starbase, Earhart. So, but I don't remember what episode that is. I'm not even that kind of Orion. When Mariner suggests that Tendi use her pheromones, Tendi objects, saying, I'm not even that kind of Orion. This reference mostly references the Enterprise episode Bound, in which we learn that the Orion slave women are actually not slaves, but secretly manipulating all the males in their society through pheromones. The famous Orion pheromones originate in the TOS pilot episode The Cage. Tendi later mentions the stigmas around Orions and that it was hard to get into the academy. Taken with not that kind of Orion references could also reference the film Star Trek in 2009, in which Uhura is roommates with an Orion. Gayla, Rachel Nichols, I should say, who I remember she used to be on Continuum, I believe. Not as an Orion, but
Yeah.
You didn't appear to be that kind of Orion either. Not that kind of Orion may also reference the animated series episode The Pirates of Orion, in which everyone randomly pronounces it to be Orion rather than Orion for no clear reason. I don't know. Tom Paris, of course, returning. That's, of course, another reference. The multiverse of Shacks. In Rutherford's Nightmare, there are a multitude of Shacks from across the multiverse of imagination. And we won't get into that too much, but because we already talked about that a couple of times. Mariner says Tendi, she didn't realize that Tendi had a last name or first name, but she thought that Tendi maybe had no last name like Odo. But her first name is Devana Tendi, which I think we knew because we had seen that, of course, before. But she just assumed that she just basically had one name like Odo does. And Tendi says her first name in the very first episode of Lower Decks. That's why I knew it. And again, we see her name on the Crisis Point credits, and written in the credits, the movie credits there. But it's possible it was never spoken out loud in a scene that Mariner has been in. This joke could reference the idea that Sulu and Uhura both didn't have first names spoken on screen until much later in canon. That, in fact, in Star Trek 2009, it's a running joke that Kirk does not know Uhura's name until Spock calls her Nyota. Let's see. Boimler reference to Scotty. And that's in the Jeffries tubes. Boimler says nobody knows the Cerritos like Bradward Boimler, and then he gets smacked in the head by a closing hatch. This probably references Scotty in The Final Frontier when he says, "I know this ship like the back of my hand," and he, passes out on a bulkhead. There's the time when Shax refers to Rutherford as Baby Bear. And that was something that we got in season 1, episode 2, Envoys. He calls him Baby Bear. Of course, the Kazon. We have from Voyager computer ramming speed. That is probably has something to do with a reference to Worf in First Contact, where he says that to the Borg ship, assume ramming speed. And I believe it's not mentioned here, but I want to say that Picard says something similar to ram the Shinzon's flagship in that in the Nemesis. He may have not called it ramming speed, but it was something similar to that anyway. Also, did you get your bowl signed by Chakotay or whatever? That Mariner teases Boimler at the end of the episode, intentionally pretending that she doesn't know the difference between Chakotay and Tom Paris. Interestingly enough, both Tom Paris and Chakotay had criminal records before getting stranded in the Delta Quadrant. It seems like they're both doing fine upon the return of Voy to the Delta Quadrant. Yeah, so I guess they weren't prosecuted for their, All right, so that's it for our Spot the References section. And thank you again for denofgeek.com. Let's move on to our shipwide announcements. Again, thanks to Wes Huntington for collecting these for us. The big thing that got announced this week, September 8th, you should keep your calendars open. There will be Star Trek Day announced September 8th, and there was a fairly lengthy trailer given there, and it showed stuff from Discovery, from Strange New Worlds, from Picard, from Prodigy. It looks like all of those shows are going to have a presence on Star Trek Day, as well as some of the other shows, and I think possibly TNG and Voyager as well, but the new shows that all have premieres, scheduled to be coming up, in the next several months, will all get some kind of time to shine on Star Trek Day. So let's make sure that you watch out for more information on that. I know it'll be on StarTrek.com. You'll also be able to see it on YouTube, on Facebook. As far as I know, on Paramount Plus. I don't know about Amazon Prime, but I wouldn't be surprised if also in Latin America, if they're going to make Paramount Plus available in September in time for that or not. I haven't heard anything, but look out for that if you're in Latin America. But again, I can't say for sure, but it's probably likely that there'll be trailers, at least maybe some teasers, and we shall see. Bijo Trimble, who was one of the first original organizers of the Star Trek campaign that was able to get the third season of the original series renewed for NBC and Paramount at the time, has been had her health declining in recent months and years, and is now in an assisted living facility. It was just announced on there, and I think there might have been, I don't know, some campaign about that. But Discovery executive producer Michelle Paradise has finally announced that season 4 has wrapped. She even laid a subtle hint that they'll be back soon for a 5th season. We're turning off the lights and leaving the stages in good hands until next time, she says. When Paramount Plus announces a 5th season, it will be the 5th season of a Star Trek series since Voyager in 1998. Okay, yeah, exactly. Okay. Also, it's not mentioned here. He missed it. Oh, goodness, Wes, you missed something big. This episode was supposedly the 800th episode of Star Trek. So, according to Star Trek.com and Paramount Plus, it was the 800th episode. So, I just realized that as I'm reading this, it's like, where's that announcement? Some sad news. We mentioned Bijo Trimble, but some very sad news. I don't recognize the name, but I know he was a licensing executive with Star Trek, the Star Trek properties. Bill Burke has passed away at 55. Not sure what he died of, but he obviously died too soon. He was a part of merchandise, bringing a lot of the merchandise for Star Trek, and such as Star Trek The Cruise, for example. So he was responsible for that kind of stuff, and unfortunately, he has passed away. Star Trek Magazine has kind of been on the hiatus or on the back burner since COVID, and they announced this week that the magazine is returning in November, being rebranded as Star Trek Explorer. So I think that's mostly a magazine that appears in the UK, if I'm not mistaken, but I know you can get it in the US, like via imports. I've seen it on shelves, like in Barnes and Noble and stuff like that. So, but it's returning in November apparently. It appears that we expected this to happen. I've been calling for it for months, or years actually, that once the new shows got, solidified on Paramount Plus, that we would start seeing some of those shows that are on these other streaming services to leave them. And a bunch of the Star Trek shows are expiring their contracts in the US. For example, at the end of September, Voyager, the original series, and Enterprise will no longer be on Netflix. So they will be available on Paramount Plus. As far as I know, they're still available on Hulu and Amazon Prime, but they won't be available on Netflix anymore. So,
yeah, which was one of the reasons why I even I stayed on with Netflix for so long. I'm not with them now, but it was that was my whole why I kept my subscription. It was because I had all of my Star Trek on there.
Yeah, and I recently I still have Hulu, but I have the commercial version. But we use that for some things, and because we use it so often, we have Amazon Prime, so I can watch them there. But I tend to watch my Star Trek now just on Paramount Plus. The versions of them that are on there are much better than the ones I used to have. They've increased the quality of the picture, than from what they were. So
yeah, after I left Netflix,
and the sound quality too.
Yeah.
I don't have Netflix either.
Well, no, that's the thing. It's we left Netflix, I don't know, pretty long ago. But it was I have YouTube TV. And so I immediately set it up to record every Star Trek there, just, because some of them are on Amazon Prime, and, I figured all this would, I subscribe to Paramount Plus, obviously, but it's I would be completely happy just to have it all under one roof. I have one streaming service. I hate having to pay for stuff I don't need.
And you can get Paramount Plus through Amazon. Can you get it through YouTube TV?
No, they don't. Yeah, because it's still. It's you can do HBO, Showtime or whatever, which is actually the same. But yeah, it's not YouTube TV's not Apple or Prime, where you can actually get those channels and subscribe through them. It's more just if it's on broadcast or on cable channels, then it's on YouTube.
All right, well, that is it for our episode this week. So I'll just take us on out and tell people how to contact us.
Yep. To submit your theory and feedback, go to talkthroughmedia.com/feedback, where you can submit text or audio. You can also call us and leave a voicemail at 216-232-6146. You can also email us at lowerdecks@talkthroughmedia.com. And you can post in our designated episode thread in our Facebook group, and you can find that at facebook.com/group/Star Trek TTM podcasts with an S. The deadline for Lower Decks Season 2, Episode 4 will be on a regular day and time, Friday, September 3rd, 2021 at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Central. If you want to support us, you can find us at Twitter and Instagram at Star Trek TTM on both. A great way you can support us is to share us on Twitter and Facebook. And you can go to facebook.com/talkthroughmedia where you can write us a review. Please share us on Facebook and retweet us on Twitter, especially when we post that the new episode is out. That would be very helpful to get it out. Subscribe to our Talk Through Media YouTube channel. That's where you'll find new episodes before anywhere else for the podcast, not the Patreon. Subscribe to us in Apple Podcasts or the podcast client of your choice. And while you're there, give us a rating or review. Also, another way to help us support us is through our Patreon. And we'd like to thank our Patreon supporters, James Robbins, Kim Bogley, Brian Shiro, Christopher Lechner, Leah Ratke, Michael Carrier, Stephen Chambers, Kevin Lyle, Joff Jeffrey, Robert Kaiser, Clint McCullough, Mike, and our new supporter, Trey Whipke. Yay!
Yeah.
Thank you, Trey. And Lawrence Todd and, well, me.
That guy.
That guy.
Yeah. So the Patreon supporters this week are going to get a very special treat that I mentioned at the beginning of this episode. We're doing something brand new. We are going to release a relatively uncensored or lightly censored version of this episode out to patrons ahead of everybody else. And you can get this if you become a patron. So you guys won't hear this, but for next week and all that, you will, if you sign up, you will be able to get the episode anywhere from a couple of days to several days ahead of everyone else. So we're doing this as an experiment to see how it works and how fast we can get it out. And, hopefully we'll continue this, but we've got some special plans for the patrons. So anyway, if you are listening to us on the Star Trek Picard cast feed, just remember, if you also watch Star Trek Discovery, you might want to switch over to the Star Trek Discovery podcast feed so that you will get Discovery, Picard, Lower Decks, Prodigy, Strange New Worlds. All of them will be on that one feed. And everything that Talk Through Media does is found on the Talk Through Media all-inclusive feed, which also contains the Rebinged DS9 and the Walking Dead Talk-Through feed. And Kyle, LT, and I, and unfortunately LT was unable to make it this week to this episode, but LT, Kyle, and I are back doing the Walking Dead Talk-Through. We've already released the episode, and we actually had Ruthie join us for the season opener, season 11, episode 1, Acheron Part 1. And, so we've got another episode coming out for Acheron Part 2.
Part 2?
Yeah. Anyway, so that's also out. So if you want to listen to us on there, again, go to talkthroughmedia.com or just find us where you find other podcasts. Our next episode of the Star Trek Lower Decks podcast is Season 2, Episode 4, titled Mugato Gamato. I don't know who's written it or directed it, and we don't have a description. But until next time, I'm Brian.
And I'm Kyle.
Peace and long life.
Live long and prosper.